Alright, so the new patch just dropped. Not a whole lot of changes for the main roster, but a lot of changes for the cameos. We're going to be going through most of that today. So first up is Johnny Cage, and Johnny Cage got a slight nerf in that now his show-off parry, which is his down back 1, it now has combo damage scaling, which overall nerfs his damage if he lands this. As you can see here naturally, this forward 1, 2, 4 string does 123 damage. But if I were to do that string from the parry, you'd see that it would scale. It only does 92 damage. That is a lot of scaling. So basically, if you land this parry, you are giving yourself a detriment, which I don't know why they changed it to be like that. That kind of defeats the purpose of a parry. It's like you make that read, and then you get a full combo on your opponent. But now it's like you get nothing, which is really weird. So yeah. Overall, a nerf for Johnny, and in my opinion, an unwarranted one. So next up is Reptile, and Reptile got a slight buff to his overhead, which is his back 2. As you know, his back 2 is either a really fast overhead, or it can be charged up into a launcher, or you can go ahead and cancel that into his death roll or any special of his. But now, he can actually cancel it into Kameo assists. So let's say you're using Kung Lao with Reptile, you can actually do a back 2 and put out a low hat, and then create a overhead low situation from there. And you could really do that with any assist now, which is pretty cool. If you're using Striker, you could go ahead and use his overhead baton or low baton, and you'd be plus on block if your opponent guessed correctly. Or if you're using like Frost, you could possibly do the low freeze and freeze your opponent. So the last character of the main roster who got buffed is Sub-Zero, though the buffs are not substantial and they do not fix him at all. So what did they change? Well, they made it so that Sub-Zero's back 2 is now active 1 frame longer on the second hit. So it used to be 26 frames active, now it's 27. Doesn't really change the fact that the launcher is not that good. It's very slow, it's easy to read. And also, the first hit is now 1 frame faster when it comes to special canceling. Which means you could cancel into like a slide 1 frame quicker. That doesn't really help him. And the second buff, they quote-unquote buff they gave to Sub-Zero is that now his Ice Clone costs 2 bars a meter and you can leave 2 additional Ice Clones behind. That is not what Sub-Zero needed as a buff. In my opinion, this makes it so he burns through even more meter that he really needs. So, to me, this is more like a nerf. And also, I'm pretty sure it's bugged right now, because when I do the enhance, it automatically takes my 2 bars. But what you're supposed to be able to do is enhance it for 1 bar and leave only 1 Ice Clone down, but that Ice Clone stays for a really long time. So right now, they buffed Sub-Zero, but they actually bugged him. And now you can't do the actual 1 bar enhance. You can only do the 2 bar enhance, which means, you know, you're constantly using 2 bars for Ice Clone. So yeah, they actually kind of messed up their buff for Sub-Zero, and now you can't actually leave 1 Ice Clone, and now it will always cost you 2 bars of meter. So, not good changes for Sub-Zero, they're hardly buffs. And one last thing is that if you use Tremor with Sub-Zero, and you know that Tremor, his uppercut, used to be -7 with certain characters. Well, they changed it and they fixed it now. So if you're gonna use Tremor to launch people with his uppercut as Sub-Zero, it's now -16, like it was, I guess, supposed to be, like it was for all the other characters. Which means Sub-Zero no longer gets that exclusive buff of having Tremor launch and only being -7 on block. So that is it for Sub-Zero. Really terrible changes. So the major changes of this patch is actually the cameos. So all of the cameos got buffed except for Kung Lao and Striker. These two got either nerfed or they stayed the same. So we're going to start with Kung Lao. So how did Kung Lao get nerfed as a cameo? They made it so that his low hat is actually -3 when done, right up next to your opponent. So you can see there it's no longer +2, it's -3, which means that it's still completely safe to do it. And you are still somewhat open to challenge your opponents with their down 1 or a down 3 or, you know, whatever is your quickest button. But yeah, overall it's a nerf for Kung Lao. He still recharges super fast. So the next cameo that got buffed is Cyrax. And Cyrax got a really good buff in my opinion. Though it doesn't make up for, you know, him losing 2 horizontal buzzsaws. Now his net will actually meter drain your opponent if it lands. So as you can see there, landing it once drains one whole bar of meter, which is really good if if you let them stay in the net the whole duration. So that is just an all-around good change for his net, because net, for most characters, that's really, really hard to land. It's got that long startup, so it rewards you even more, and now your opponent can no longer immediately break from a combo, which is pretty cool. So the next cameo that got a buff is Darrius, and Darrius got a whole new move, as well as faster recharge rate, just in general. So before, Darrius used to be really slow when it came to recharging his cameo meter, but now he's actually a little bit faster and he recharges a little quicker. So his new move is called Heel Turn, and it can only be done on an opponent who's knocked down. So let's say I get a knockdown like from this string, I can call in Darrius, he's standing behind them, and he'll knock them down again with an overhead, and you can delay that overhead however long you'd like. Here I can do it immediately. And from there, you can basically do a bunch of low overhead scenarios, which is pretty cool. But it is different from his heel turn from the forward front flip, because this one will actually launch your opponent, whereas this one will just help you on wake up setups and give you some better Oki, especially if your character, doesn't have very good wake up situations. Darrius will now definitely help, which is actually pretty cool that they are incentivizing, and hopefully this helps new players learn about wake up situations and how important those can be. So Frost got buffed, and now her Snowflake special, which is her back assist, they now travel 10 frames quicker, and they last 20 frames longer, which means it can go full screen, and it can actually, catch people who are trying to run away from it if you just hold them at full screen like this. So yeah, it's a pretty decent buff for the Frost cameo. I don't think it's super major. Not a whole lot of people use the Snowflake assist, but for those of you that use it, I can imagine you're pretty happy with this change. So Goro got slightly buffed, and it's only on his punch walk, which not a whole lot of people use punch walk. But basically on block now, it's a little bit safer. So you can see there, you have a block advantage of 9 frames, and there's a lot more pushback on it. And as you can imagine, if you were to do this in the corner, you can get some advantage. Right up next to your opponent, you still get those 9 frames. So great for corner pressure, more pushback now. All around, a buff for Goro. Kano's eye laser is now a mid, which means people can no longer duck it. And it now does 10 more damage, so it used to be 90 damage before, now it's 100. And it also does increase damage on block. So if your opponent does block it, you have more of a chance to chip them out. As you can see right there. So Motaro's forward assist, which is his tail shot, now causes more pushback and has 10 more frames of block stun, which means you have 13 frames of block advantage. And the recharge rate after doing a tail shot or doing his reflect is now a lot quicker, and as you can see there, he recharges really fast, more in line with Kung Lao's recharge rate. So Sareena got a slight nerf in that her back assist, which is Kia's blades, it looks like that. The projectiles will no longer return if they are destroyed by certain moves. As you can see right there, the blades did not return because Sub-Zero destroyed them. Some moves will still let them return, but most of the time, or most specials now, will actually destroy them completely, which is overall, I think it's a good change, because it was really weird when you would guess right and use an anti-zone move, but they'd still hit you out of it anyways. So I think it's a pretty fair change for Sareena. So Scorpion got a buff in that his Get Over Here now recharges his cameo quicker if you choose to do that. And his Hellblades, which is his forward assist overhead, they're now safe on block. It's only -2, and on miss, it actually recovers 5 frames quicker. So you're not as open to being hit by your opponent, which is a pretty decent buff for Scorpion cameo. So Sektor got a slight buff and a slight nerf to his flamethrower, which is his forward assist. So now it always hits twice, it comes out 5 frames quicker, and it gives you block advantage of 3, though it has a little less pushback. Now the nerf part is that the second hit is very up blockable, which means even if the first hit lands, they can up block the second, and now you're -32 frames, so you will get punished if your opponent knows to up block that second hit. So Shujinko got a slight buff in that he gives you 400 health now instead of 300. So what that means is that you get an extra 100 HP. So for Quan Chi, that brings me up to 1000. For Sub-Zero, it brings him up to 1100. So Sonya got a slight buff and a slight nerf, in that her leg grab now recovers quicker on miss, and on block it recovers a little bit quicker as well. It's only -9, which is still pretty unsafe, but not as unsafe. But the nerfed part is that now it's an up blockable move. So if your opponent reads it, they can up block that, and now you're -24 and you eat a full combo. So the next move that got slightly buffed, slightly nerfed is her energy rings. Now energy rings actually hit mid, so you can no longer duck them, but it does have increased combo damage scaling, so if you like to use them in combos, they do a little less damage now. And if you do a fully charged energy ring on block, it has a different hit reaction. It now causes your opponent to get pushed back quite a bit compared to if you do regular. But you still have pretty good block advantage on it now, and it's very safe. So the final character that got a change is Tremor, and now he actually brings your health up by 400 instead of 300. So for Quan Chi, he has 1000 health. For Sub-Zero, he gives him 1100 health. And as for the nerf, I did show it earlier, but for characters like Sub-Zero and a few others, if you do use his uppercut, it's no longer -7 on block for those few characters. It's now -16 like it is for the rest of the cast, which is a bit unfortunate because a character like Sub-Zero could really use something like that. And that is it for the changes to Mortal Kombat 1 in this patch. Overall, I'd say they were actually pretty good and they're a step in the right direction, at least with the cameos, because now you are further incentivized to use other cameos that aren't Kung Lao or Striker. They buffed all the underutilized ones, and I think that's just a great change, though Jax did not get any changes in this patch, and neither did Striker, which I would have liked to seen them get at least something a little bit different. Same with the Sub-Zero cameo, but everyone else getting buffed is a really good step in the right direction. Let me know what you guys think about this, and I will see you in the next video.